So, would you like to do a death contemplation? Yeah? So we'll do a little bit of safety framing. And I mean that it's a good thing to do, right? So there's people in this room who have lost loved ones quite recently. There's people in this room who have seen dead bodies. And sometimes these kinds of contemplations can bring up some unpleasant or difficult memories. And so I just want to acknowledge that for some people this might be a difficult contemplation to do. And to let you know that it's okay if you feel some discomfort. A little bit of discomfort is okay. But if it becomes overwhelming and you feel like the contemplation isn't for you, at any time you can just leave. Go outside, get some fresh air, chill out, and when you're ready you can come back in. So I just want to let you know that that's okay to do if that happens for you. However, you have also been working with your mind the last 2 days, developing peace and stability through the practice of anapanasati, the breath meditation. And we've also been very gradually getting used to this idea of contemplating death in various ways. So I think for most of you, even though you've lost some loved ones recently, or you're still in grief, or you've seen dead bodies, I think this meditation will be useful for you to do. So the Buddha recommended the practice of maranasati, the contemplation of death, and taught it in several different ways. So we just saw in the sutta that we just read about the kind of things that could lead to death. There's also a collection of suttas called Future Perils, where unfortunate events in the future are enumerated. But probably the one place that most of you are already familiar with doing a kind of death contemplation is through the Satipatthana Suttas, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it comes under the awareness of the body, mindfulness of the body. So under that category we have things like the breath. We also have things like the 4 elements. And then we have the 9 cemetery contemplations, the 9 contemplations of the decomposition of a corpse. And so the Buddha recommended this practice. And at that time, cemeteries were quite different. They're not like the neat kind of sleek and well-maintained cemeteries that you might go to when someone you know dies. They weren't like the beautiful Gothic Victorian cemeteries that are still around in many places in the world. They were called charnel grounds, and there were places where people just dumped bodies. Maybe there would have been a little bit of cremation happening there. Cremation would have been expensive, right? And so these were places that the Buddha encouraged monks and nuns to go and visit. Why? To make it real. And today, monks and nuns sometimes will have like a little file at the back of the library. It will say monks and nuns only. And it'll be a little collection of asubha, the repulsive. And there'll be some images of things like a corpse or a post-mortem and things like that. And so this is like the ersatz kind of form of doing this kind of contemplation, just looking at it in pictures. There's some places where monks and nuns will be invited to go and actually witness a post-mortem in like a hospital or a teaching institution. There's some places, some friends of mine have visited these places where the forensics team of police forces have like a little place where they leave some bodies out so that they can learn how long it takes for a body to decompose and things like that in various conditions so they can do better policing. So these are some ways that people might do this contemplation today. You don't really have to go that far though. I mean, you can just walk around and you see death everywhere. You see the poor snails that have been trodden on. You see the ducks hanging in the window of the butchers. You see the little chicken corpses on the table, ready to eat. We don't have to look far to find death. Little ants on the floor, dead flies on the windowsill. So there's everywhere. Death is everywhere, right? But this kind of death doesn't impact us for some reason, does it? Doesn't affect us very deeply. We're so immune to it. So there is something special about putting a container around a contemplation like this and bringing our full awareness to it, bringing all our attention to it, leading up to it over a few days and allowing it to have an impact on our mind. And so we're going to do this corpse meditation, the 9 cemetery contemplations, where we visualize a corpse in front of us, lying down. The Buddha said, this body, the vows, eventually it'll just be like a log, just like a log lying there. That's what this body is like, just like a log lying there. And we'll visualize the various stages that corpse goes through. So this helps us, firstly, to understand the nature of life and death. It also will help us to understand our ideas of self. We inquire more deeply into, where did I come from? What is this body? Who does this body belong to after I die? Why am I holding on to this idea of me, mine? This is my body, when I have to just give it up. And so these are the kinds of things that we're going to be investigating. And that's why it's such a powerful practice. It hits so many of the right buttons for Buddhist doctrine and for just anyone in the world who's got a body, who's alive. So we're going to just take a few minutes to settle into our practice, and then I'll come back and I'll begin the guided meditation. I wonder if it's possible to turn the lights down a little bit. Okay, good. So we've got maybe 30 or 40 minutes, so let's just spend a good 10 minutes arriving in this moment, in this meditation. Remembering that here we are, together, surrounded by good friends, supported in this place. So we don't have to worry, we can just relax, we can let go, we can allow ourselves to come to that place of calm, peace, that we know is somewhere there, deep inside of us. And so just spend 10 minutes becoming aware of your body in space, relaxing, settling, allowing the mind to become peaceful and calm. Perhaps watching the breath. So practice however you want for the next 10 or so minutes. And now, surrounded by friends and supported by the Dhamma, we'll begin our contemplation of death. Visualize in front of you the corpse of an unknown person, 1, 2, or 3 days dead. This corpse is starting to change now that it no longer supports life. A process has begun. A natural process, a process that happens to all bodies left lying there in this way. And so this body, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days old, has started to bloat and swell due to the gases inside the body. The blood, which used to pulse, has stopped moving and has begun to pool. Turning the body blue, blotched. The skin changing, taking on a waxy appearance, mottled, blue, blotched. There's some liquid at the corners of the mouth, the eyes. And you notice there is no breath, there is no movement, there is no life left in this body. And yet there is change, there is a process. So you visualize this body bloated, blue, lifeless. See it clearly. See the head, face, the vacant eyes. See the mouth. See the shoulders and arms and chest and torso. See the stiffness in the limbs. See the pressure in the skin, bloated and blue. Seeing clearly, we reflect. My body is of the same nature. I have not gone beyond death. My body too will be like this. There's nothing I can do to stop it. This will be my inescapable fate. And it's okay. It's normal and natural. All beings must die. All bodies must change and decay. This process, this natural process, continues. Now that body becomes food for other living beings. Dogs gnaw at it. Jackals take bites. Crows and vultures peck at it. And we see so many tiny creatures. Ants, flies, maggots, all feasting on this body. It's normal. It's only natural. This is a part of the process, this natural process. And so too, my body is of the same nature. I have not gone beyond death. When I leave this body, it will become food for other beings. And there's nothing I can do to prevent it. This body won't belong to me. This body is not mine. And the process continues. The animals, insects, birds have taken their fill of the flesh and skin of that body lying there. Now the insides of that body are revealed, the skin pulled back like a curtain. We see flesh. We see blood. We see bones. We see tendons. We see the insides. We see what is usually hidden from us. We see how fragile, how impermanent a body is. My body is of the same nature. I have skin and flesh, blood, bones, and tendons. and I have not gone beyond death. My body too will look just like that. My body too will go through this process of change. I can't stop it. This is my inescapable fate. The body continues to change, to decay. Now the flesh eaten away completely, leaving a skeleton stained by blood, the bones held together by tendons. And soon even that blood dries up. The bones, the tendons are all that's left. Those tendons holding that body together, holding what's left of the human form. A puppet with strings. And so too my body, held together, so fragile. My body will look just like that. Bones held together by tendons. This will be my fate. And over time, the process continues. Now, even those tendons have dried out, withered away, been eaten. Those strings that held that body together, gone. That human shape, shattered. The bones scattered. Here a foot bone, there a hand bone, over there a shin bone, there a thigh bone. A rib bone, over there a neck bone, over there a tooth, over there jaw, and over there a skull. My body is of the same nature. My bones will become scattered. There's nothing I can do about it. But this is natural. This is a process. This is my fate. Those bones scattered, baking in the sun, bleached by the sunlight. They become bright, white, just like a conch shell. But over time, they change, becoming yellow, decaying, and moved by the wind and rain, kicked by people, picked over by animals. Now, all that's left is a pile of yellowed, brown bones. My body is of the same nature. I have not gone beyond death. My bones too will become yellow, old, brittle. And it's okay. This is a natural process. And now, many years, many hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years in the future, those yellow, decaying bones, eroded by wind and water, they've become nothing more than a pile of dust. That body we saw has changed. That body has undergone a natural process of decay. And now all that remains is dust. My body is of the same nature. I have not gone beyond death. All beings that are born must die. Those bodies will decay. My body will decay. There's nothing I can do to stop it. This is my inescapable fate. Knowing this, understanding this, Why do I cling so tightly to this body of mine? This body that has been changing since before I was born. Changing as I grew up. Changing as I grew old. And will continue to change after I die. Why do I cling to this body? To me, mine, I. This body does not belong to me. This body is not self. And so for the next few minutes, reviewing the process, the change that happened to that body, remembering what happened to that 1 day, 2 day, 3 day old corpse, bloated and blue, mottled, lifeless. Remembering how it was eaten by dogs, jackals, crows, and vultures, insects, and how the skin pulled back revealed flesh, blood, bones, tendons, how the flesh decayed, leaving a blood-stained skeleton connected by tendons, the bones eventually becoming scattered, turning white, bleached by the sun. And then aging, becoming brown and yellow, decrepit. And finally, becoming nothing more than dust. Remembering that my body is of the same nature, that this will be my fate. Now we're coming to the end of this practice. Still with your eyes closed, take a few moments to review. How are you feeling? How was it to contemplate a corpse? To imagine your own death? Was it challenging? Was it easy? Was there something that stuck out for you? What did you learn about bodies? What did you learn about yourself? And did you find some peace whilst contemplating death? And so now we'll leave behind our contemplation. We come back to this room, here and now, surrounded by friends, supported. So we let go the contemplation arising from the meditation. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Good. So maybe we can have the lights back on. Maybe just one. You're alive. Yeah. You're alive. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah? So what are you going to do about it? So why don't we take a few minutes to stretch, move around, maybe use the bathroom, and come back and we'll do something else. Okay? Be quick, maybe 5 minutes? 5 minutes. 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. Very good. See you in 10 minutes. Was it your first contemplation on death, some of you, maybe? Yeah? Good. And so some people were sharing that they found it good and useful and profound. So I wonder if it stirred anything in you, if it samvegaed anything in you. Maybe a little. I was talking before with some people about how important it is to actually engage in an emotional sense with these reflections like old age, sickness, death. We need to have some sort of emotional reaction. Often in Buddhism we're trained to be very neutral, like to have equanimity and to not feel anything. Sometimes we're kind of told that emotions are bad, we shouldn't have them, we should get rid of them. But the Buddha, he often encouraged emotional responses, and the whole path is emotional, in that we experience things like joy and happiness, and we rejoice in other people's goodness, or we experience a strong desire to escape suffering. When we contemplate things with Samvega, we experience this emotional response of a mixture of fear and concern and a desire to escape. And so these emotional responses are sometimes very useful, very instructive. And for many of us, we've covered over our emotions. We've trained ourselves to not feel, and we might sometimes even think that that's the spiritual way to go. But sometimes what's happening is that we've just become numb. We've allowed ourselves to stop feeling. Feelings are so difficult and awkward. Feelings can be too much sometimes. But feeling our way into understanding these topics is important. Feeling that response to the idea of death. Feeling a response to the idea of sickness and old age. It should affect you. Seeing it clearly should affect you. Maybe if it doesn't affect us, we haven't seen it clearly enough. And so we keep investigating. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite suttas. I know I've said that about all of the suttas so far. One of my favourite suttas, where the Buddha talks about the importance of being stirred by the contemplation of death. So I'll leave that for tomorrow. Did anyone have anything they wanted to say about the contemplation? Anything they wanted to add, or any questions about it? Any complaints? No? So it's something that you can do from time to time. You might not want to make it like a daily practice, but from time to time it's really healthy to contemplate impermanence in this way. But remember to always balance it out with, the peace, the pasada, with the quiet confidence and composure that you have developed over these last few days, so that your mind is strong and stable and able to look without being scared or frightened. So remember to always develop that as your base, and then when you come to do the death contemplation, your mind's prepared, you're in a good place, and it's not going to freak you out too much. So I'll start answering some questions. How to practice Vipassana. So this is like a whole retreat in itself. The first thing to be aware of is that the way this word is used has become somewhat misused. And to tell you the truth, I've got no idea what it means anymore. It's got so many different meanings. So the way the Buddha used this term Vipassana is quite particular, and he didn't separate the practice of Vipassana in the way it's become separated over the last few hundred years. And he didn't brand it as a meditation method, as has happened over the last 4 or 5 decades. That long? Yeah. And so sometimes when people talk about Vipassana, they're like, practice Vipassana, practice Vipassana. And they basically mean just do meditation. And one place I was staying recently, the abbot would say things like, Vipassana protects your mind. Vipassana, yeah, it's kind of like a synonym for wisdom, but many people use it just as a synonym for meditation. Like, Vipassana protects your mind. Vipassana helps to purify your mind. Vipassana is always good. Vipassana, practice Vipassana, practice Vipassana. And it's like, what do you mean by that? Like, you know? And so it's quite confusing. A lot of the modernist meditation methods, such as the Mahesi Sayadaw method, the Vipassana movement out of Burma, has a kind of very particular way of thinking about Vipassana. So it usually involves doing things like body scan meditation and looking at the 3 characteristics of impermanence, not self, and suffering. And so these are what you kind of look on the lookout for. And so people have also divided meditation up into, like, there's samatha meditation and vipassana meditation, and they're like, this is a vipassana practice and this is a samatha practice. And it can all get rather confusing. So some people will say the breath is a samatha practice. But the Buddha said that the breath is both samatha and vipassana. And all of our practices require this peacefulness, composure, steadiness, stability of the mind. And all of our practices investigate and look at what's happening. And that's how we develop insight, which is what Vipassana is. Vipassana is insight, or Ajahn Brahmali is now translating it as... I remember when he told me it, I was kind of like, clear seeing. Clear seeing. So Vipassana is not some magical state or magical method, or it's not some sort of, I don't know how to describe it, like some people are like, oh yeah, I got Vipassana. It's not some sort of state. It's just seeing in accordance with reality, that things arise and pass. That's Vipassana, seeing, okay, I got an insight into that. I got some clarity around that. And so the Buddha said that Vipassana and samatha go together. It's not something we can separate. And so in your practice, you can just do breath meditation, you're calming the mind, but you're also seeing change. You're seeing the impermanence of each and every breath. You're seeing not self. Like, who is doing this breathing? You know, it seems sometimes so out of your control. And you can see the nature of suffering in this breath. Wanting this, craving for that. You can see how the process of meditation has to include samatha and vipassana. There are particular types of meditation that will emphasize certain aspects of seeing those characteristics, such as doing things like death contemplation or body contemplation. We're actively looking in some of those practices for the change. We're seeing the not-self nature when we examine the 4 elements, for example. So these are just approaches. But Vipassana is not something all on its own. It's not like its own category of Buddhism, which is what it's become in many places. And so when we practice Vipassana, all we're doing is training to see more clearly. So that's going to be my response today to that question. Any tips for walking meditation? Yes, I love walking meditation. And you know, I was going to teach it this afternoon, but the rain, right? And I thought, what kind of yogis are they? Will they go out and walk in the rain? In the hall, yeah, I don't know, there's quite a lot of people. Depends. Sometimes people walk in a circle, but I'm like a tall boy, and I'm always stuck behind the short person with little legs. So I never get to do any walking. I just kind of get to stop, stand still, do standing meditation, then move one foot. So, walking meditation. I love walking meditation. Do you practice walking meditation? Anyone here? Yeah? You like it too? So, the Buddha encouraged us to practice in all 4 postures. So those are sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. So these are postures that we can meditate in. And walking meditation is like a tool in our toolkit. So we can use it for a particular purpose. And when the Buddha talked about walking meditation, he said that walking meditation is good for many reasons. It provides exercise for the body. So that's good, isn't it? Especially if you've been sitting a long time, you want to exercise the body, because sitting, we start to get tight. Our old bones start to creak. So walking just kind of stretches it out and makes us feel a bit more energized, brings some blood flow back into the body. So it provides exercise for the body. And it allows for you to have endurance. So remember that the Buddha walked everywhere until he was 80 years old, walking everywhere barefoot. And so he had this exercise and this endurance that came from walking meditation. Walking meditation is also good because it helps us digest our food. And so that's why you often find in monasteries and retreat centres they'll encourage walking meditation after the meal. Because you know how it is when you sit after you've eaten, like game over, right? So if you want to keep on developing your mindfulness after a heavy meal, then walking meditation is really good, because you won't fall asleep, hopefully, when you're walking. It's still possible. But most importantly, the Buddha said that the kind of samadhi developed by walking meditation lasts a long time. And that's something that we can see when we practice walking meditation. And this is why often we'll practice walking meditation before we sit, because we're developing samadhi whilst moving the body. Then, when it comes time to sit, we feel like we're already in the zone. We've developed a lot of meditation power and energy. And we've developed it on an object that is quite large, the movement of our feet connecting with the earth. So this is really easy to see, right? Left, right, left, right. We're aware of this large bodily movement. And so the mind can focus on this. Sometimes focusing on the breath is really hard because it's so subtle, so difficult to see, especially when we begin our practice. But walking, we can't help but be aware of what's going on. So it's easy to develop mindfulness. And the steady walking back and walking forth, back and forth, back and forth, helps calm the mind so that we can see the object really clearly. So walking meditation is also really good if you have anxiety, some stress, some problems in your life. It's good to do some walking meditation. Sometimes it's better to do walking meditation than seated meditation, especially if you've got anxiety or obsessive thoughts. Probably not a good idea to do seated meditation, because there you are sitting with your anxious mind and your obsessive thoughts, right? It's hard to work with those. It's much better to get the calm and mindfulness from walking meditation instead. Yeah, sometimes you can walk fast, sometimes you can walk slow, but don't walk too slow. So I don't recommend slow walking. Some people love slow walking, but I find that it actually creates a huge amount of tension and tightness in the body because it's unnatural, it's exaggerated, and it actually requires a lot of effort, control and will to move the body so slowly. It puts a lot of pressure on the joints and it can become quite painful. So I recommend walking naturally. I think the Buddha probably would have recommended walking naturally too. He never said walk slowly. Buddha was always very much kind of the middle path. There is a story though about Venerable Sona, who liked walking meditation. Maybe he liked it a little bit too much because he walked back and forth with such a frenzy that he actually made his feet bleed. And so the Buddha talked to him and said, well, you used to be a musician, right? You used to play the lute or the veena in ancient India. We'll just call it a lute or a zither. And you used to play that instrument. And so when you were a musician, you knew, right, if you had a really loose string, then the note wouldn't sound. But if it was too tight, then it would snap. So you have to find the right balance for that string so that it produces a beautiful sound. And so the same with our meditation practice, we have to find the balance. We don't want to be too overzealous, tight and frenzied. We just become agitated. We don't want to be too loose, relaxed and overly comfortable. We'll just fall asleep. So we've got to find that middle place. And this is something to remind ourselves all the time. We need to find that balance, and only you will know where that is, and it will change, so you have to keep on experimenting. So the same with walking meditation. I start walking out at a natural pace, and then I notice that over time I slow down a little bit. Yes?
So can you meditate running?
I think you can. A lot of people talk about the process of running, long distance running especially, and they talk about how meditative it is. And so I could see that being a kind of meditative state, a zone that you get into where you're really just like And it's the same for even maybe for things like cycling. But I suppose it depends on how we approach it, what's the intention. And so just a few more tips, and I'll show you how I do my walking meditation. The pace should be natural. You should have a walking path of 15 or 20 paces. You don't want to have more than that or less than that. 15 or 20 paces is enough to exercise the body, and not long enough that you keep walking and kind of start looking around and get lost, and not too short that if you have it too short, then you're walking back and forth so quickly, there's too much change. So you want to have like a natural walking pace that kind of allows you to go just the right distance, and then it's a natural pause and turning around. So you want to be walking back and forth. This is how the Buddha taught it, walking back and forth, pacing back and forth. And it's that regularity that helps bring calm and mindfulness. So walking in a circle, some people do that in like a group. So that becomes a bit more difficult. You're no longer doing the instruction of the Buddha and you have to follow someone else. You might be able to walk in circles if you want. You might find that works for you. In some cases, if I have a small room and it's raining or something outside, I walk the perimeter. Or I'll walk a funny angle just so that I can do my practice. And you want to keep your body relaxed. The Buddha was said to walk like an elephant's trunk, right? So really elegant, you know. You don't want to be like militantly walking your meditation. The position of the hands in front of the body. Ajahn Chah didn't like the hands behind the back. He said, "What are you, some gentleman going for a walk?" So, but I actually often do put my hands behind my back, and I'm always like, "Sorry, Ajahn Chah," because I find it helps to open up my chest and keep my back nice and straight. And often if you've been sitting, you start to hunch a bit. So if you open up like this, it can feel good. And then the last thing is the chin just kind of slightly tucked, and the eyes not looking at your feet. Your feet know where they're going. You know, you don't need to watch them. You need to look ahead, like maybe 1 or 1.5, 2 meters ahead. And this is good in case there's obstacles or ants. And it's also good because then you don't crunch the neck looking down like this, right? Like this becomes quite uncomfortable after a while. So you want to keep your body open, upright, and I think that's about it. Turning. Now, maybe I'm not a very good turner. I don't know. Some people are like getting to the end and then they have a beautiful ceremony that they do. But I'm much more relaxed. I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever. So, but it can be good to pause at each end. Some people do that deliberately. They pause and they recompose their mind. Because, you know, in between there and there is like a whole ocean of thought. If you're not careful, you will find yourself completely distracted. So you still need to keep your presence in walking meditation. And so going from one side to the other, you try to maintain that awareness. You try to maintain the mindfulness. And if you haven't, when you get to that end, there's your chance to start again. So for me, I like to just continue the walking and not stop too much. But from time to time, I'll stop and I'll just do a body scan. And so the simplest method is just to be aware of the movement of the feet, left, right. And you can kind of just say left, right. There's other methods, like some people will use Bu, Do for each footstep. Some people will use the 4 elements and they'll look at the elemental aspect of the movement. I think this is a little complicated myself, maybe a bit overly complicated. But if your mind is very refined, you've been doing a lot of intensive practice, then you can see more clearly. Sometimes the walking meditation becomes almost like an experience of not self when you do that practice, because it becomes a bit like a puppet being moved on strings, and you're just aware of, the intention to move, the actual movement itself. And we describe these in terms of the elements, but it's a bit complicated to go into now.